Hi guys, welcome back. I'm going to be solving the AS Economics Paper 1 MCQ paper that happened yesterday on the 7th of June. So without wasting any time, let's get started. So question number 1 says the diagram shows a production possibility curve. It indicates the combinations of consumer and capital goods produced by an economy using all its resources. What does position X indicate? So now X is a point that is lying outside the production possibility boundary. It lies outside the maximum economy's maximum productive capacity, right? And hence what it follows is that the reason why any point that is outside the production possibility curve is unattainable is simply due to the basic economic problem of scarcity. That is, we do not have sufficient factors of production. So the correct answer for this should be C. That is, insufficient factors of production are available, and that's what makes this point unattainable, right? Question number 2 says what is produced in a mixed economy but not in a free market economy. It's an easy question, and so we know that public goods will not be provided in a free market because it is not profitable for private firms to do so, right? And in a mixed economy, the government usually steps in to provide these goods to ensure that they are available to everyone, and hence your option D should be the correct answer. The next question number 3 says Earth observation satellites designed to acquire information are close to theoretical case of a public good. In 2011, the World Meteorological Organization estimated that improving satellite observations would cost an extra billion a year. What is a normative statement about Earth observation satellites? Now we know that normative statements expresses a value judgment about what ought to be, and it is subjective and it is based on personal beliefs, opinions, or values. And these statements, the thing about normative statement versus what a positive statement, the differentiating factor is that these normative statements cannot be tested or validated by facts alone, or you can't put them through test and collect evidence or accept or reject them, right? While a positive statement can be tested or validated by evidence, and you can accept that statement, then reject it, or amend it even based on the observable evidence. And so what it follows is that if you look at the first option, let's say it says the estimated cost of improving satellite observations is 1 billion a year. Now this is a positive statement, as it could be we can verify this information. It can be objectively verified. Now if you look at option B, the information received from satellites is non-rival. Now this is also a positive statement, as it is describing the characteristic of the information that is provided by satellites, and it could also be objectively verified through evidence. But if you look at option number D, the responsibility for the cost of the Earth observation satellites should be shared by all the governments. And this is a normative statement, as it describes or expresses an opinion on how the cost should be allocated, because it is involving a value judgment about what ought to be done, right? And so it follows that option D is representing a normative statement, right, about the Earth observation satellites. The next question number 4 says that what is the opportunity cost of a virus to the healthcare service in a country? Increased number of hospital patients, increased use of personal protective equipment. Okay, so basically we know that the opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative foregone, the benefit of the next best alternative foregone when a choice is made. And in the context of healthcare services during a virus outbreak, it will refer to the benefits that have been lost from not being able to allocate resources to other healthcare needs. And so what it follows is that option D says increased waiting times to treat non-virus patients, and this option reflects the opportunity cost because it highlights what is foregone. That is a timely, treatment for non-virus patients. Because you see, resources, let's say resources in terms of time, personnel, the staff of the hospital, and the medical equipment, all of this will be diverted to addressing the virus, leading to longer waiting times for other patients, right? And so D is the correct answer. Question number 5 says the share of total incomes from profit in a country shows more variation over time than incomes from interest, rent, and wages. Now, what is the most likely reason for this? And the correct answer for this should be boy, because it says profit is what is left after interest, rent, and wages are subtracted from total incomes. And so the statement accurately describes the nature of the profit, and profits can fluctuate significantly because they depend on the residual amount after paying all the fixed costs like interest, rent, and wages, right? And so for this MCQ, B should be the correct answer. The next question number 6 says changes in the market for gasoline, petrol, and Zimbabwe resulted in fuel shortages and long queues. Which combination of changes would have been certain to cause this situation. Now, to answer this MCQ, we need to analyze the combination of changes in both the demand and supply of gasoline that could lead to fuel shortages in long queues. And so fuel shortages and long queues would occur when the demand for gasoline exceeds the supply that is available in the market, right? And so if we, look at option number C, that is the demand for gasoline is going up while the supply of gasoline is going down, what we see is that this combination is most likely to cause shortages in long queues, because increased demand means more people want to buy gasoline, while decreased supply means there is less gasoline available. And hence, it follows that this mismatch between high demand and low supply leads to shortages and long queues as people compete for the limited available gasoline, right? So that makes C the correct answer. The next question number 7, says the diagram shows the movement of the supply curve from S1 to S2. At the price of P, what happens to the price PES for the product and the produced surplus when supply curve moves from S1 to S2? Now, firstly, we know that nothing will happen to the price velocity of supply. Well, I already have explained this in my video on how PES changes along the supply curve. And when your PES starts from the origin, we know that, the PES is 1 equals to 1 throughout the curve. Now, while S1 and S2 have different slopes, and S2 is more flatter than S1, since S2 is flatter, but then that doesn't mean that the PES will change here. So both S1 and S2 will have the same PES that is equal to 1, that is equal to unity. So the price velocity of supply has to be unchanged, which makes either C or D the answer. And as far as producer surplus is concerned, we know producer surplus is the difference between what producers are willing to accept and what they actually receive, right? Which is the area that is above the supply curve and below the price line. And so we can see that the producer surplus is increasing over here because the quantity supplied at the price of P has gone up from Q1 to Q2. And the area that is between the supply curve and the price line, if this was the producer surplus, this area has actually expanded, right, to till here. So the producer surplus is going up, right? That makes D the correct answer. The next question number 8, says the table shows different quantities of goods demanded at different prices. And so you have prices given and changes in quantity demanded given along different prices against different prices. And then similarly, you have quantity demanded given against different changes in income. And within the range of these figures, when both PED and YED for this good is inelastic. So basically they're saying that within what ranges of these figures would YED and PED both be inelastic. And if we assess the table, what we see is, if you want to talk about PED being inelastic, it simply means that quantity demanded changes less proportionally to changes in prices. And from the table, we can see that if our prices are low, let's say let's say the price goes up from 1 to 2 or it goes down from 2 to 1, we see that there's a very huge change in quantity demanded from either 120 to 40 and from 40 to 120, depending on which direction it is going. But if you look at when prices are high, let's say, if it goes up from 4 to 5 or from 5 to 4, we see a very small change in quantity demanded from 9 to 10 or 10 to 9, right? So we see that the PED is inelastic when your prices are high, right? So when your prices are high, your PED is inelastic, right? So PED is less than 1 when we're talking about when your prices are high, right? And so if you talk about YED being less than 1, inelastic demand, YED being elastic would mean that your quantity demanded changes less proportionally to changes in income. And so what we see is that at low incomes, when your income is going from 8 to 10 or 10 to 9, there's a very small change in quantity demanded proportionately, right? We see only a small drop, from 10 to 9 and from 9 to 10. But here, the change in income from 10 to 8, the change in income from 10 to 8 is relatively higher or bigger than the change in quantity demanded from 10 to 9, right? But if you look at incomes from, in the higher range, let's say, your income is going down from 48 to 24 or going up, right? In whatever direction, we see that the quantity demanded, let's say if it goes down from 48 to 24, the quantity demanded immediately drops from 120 to 40, right? It's more than 50% change in quantity demanded here, right? More than 50% decrease in quantity demanded. So for YD being less than 1, it is inelastic, when your incomes are lower, right? When your incomes are low. So what it follows is that the correct answer for this should be that when price is high and your income is low. Correct? Right, guys? Question number 9 says, in Asia, the instant noodles is an inferior good because dried fruit is a better quality substitute. The diagram shows the demand for instant noodles and what could have caused a shift from D1 to D2. Now, inferior good is one where the demand decreases as income goes up and vice versa. And so the correct answer for this should be a rise in unemployment, because if your unemployment basically goes up, it will generally decrease your real incomes, which will cause an increase in the demand for inferior goods like instant noodles, as people will look for cheaper food options. So the answer should be C. Question number 10 says the diagram shows the impact of an increase in the price of a product from P1 to P2. Which area represents the consumer surplus after the price increase? Now, consumer surplus basically represents the difference between what consumers are willing to pay for a good and what they actually end up paying, and it is the area that is under the demand curve above the price line. And so it follows that if the price goes up from P1 to P2, the new consumer surplus would be this triangle, right? RB2S. And so it follows that B should be the correct answer. Okay, guys, moving forward, the next question, which should have been question 11, but we don't have question 11 to 14 right now, so we'll directly start from question 15. Can't do much about it. Question 15 says, which government policy will increase aggregate demand? Now, we know that aggregate demand refers to total spending, and total spending could be influenced by various factors. And so the first option says raising indirect taxes, which will not. Raising indirect taxes will reduce the consumption and hence reduce aggregate demand. So this is not correct. Option B says reducing the budget surplus. Now, reducing budget surplus would mean government is increasing its government spending and or reducing taxes, which should stimulate aggregate demand via stimulating consumption and government spending, and also investments as well. So AD will then shift to the right and it will increase, and hence B should be the correct answer. The next question 16 says the table gives a value of the price index of an economy in 2 years, in year 1 and year 2, and we can see that the CPI has gone up from 60 to 120. And it's simply telling us a doubling of the price index from 60 to 120 is a 100% increase in inflation rate. And so it follows that, the average price, it means that the average level of prices has doubled then, which directly implies that the cost of living has doubled, which makes C the correct answer. The next question number 17 says what causes a rise in cost push inflation? And we know cost push inflation occurs when when the general price level goes up due to rises in cost of production and rise in raw material costs and input costs. When there's a rise in input prices, and so if you assess these, this is a good question, and if we assess these answer options, the first says a fall in the rate of income tax. Now, a fall in the rate of income tax would increase disposable incomes for consumers, which could cause demand pull inflation, not cost push. It would not directly cause, it would not cause cost push inflation, so this is not the correct option. If you look at B, it says a rise in the rate of income tax, which will reduce disposable incomes, which would cause consumer spending to fall. Again, this is not directly related to cost push inflation. In fact, it will reduce demand for inflation as consumer spending goes down. Option C says a depreciation of the exchange rate, and a depreciation of the exchange rate would make imports more expensive. And for a country that relies on imported raw materials, and it's let's say an import dependent nation, it relies on importing key raw materials, let's say commodity importing nation. So this would increase the production costs across the economy and will lead to cost push inflation, because producers would then pass on the higher cost to consumer in the form of higher prices. So that would make C the correct answer, while D is wrong, because appreciation of the exchange rate will make imports cheaper, which will reduce the production cost for businesses that rely on imported raw materials. And this would not cause cost push inflation. In fact, it would help reduce the cost push inflationary pressure. So that makes C the correct answer. Moving forward, question number 18 says which change affecting an economy's labor force will cause an increase in economic growth in the short run? So we need to figure out what is going to change among the 4 answer options that is affecting economy's labor force, but that will cause a short-run change and rise in economic growth. And so basically, if you look at option 1, an increase in the students entering university, now this could lead to long-term economic growth by increasing the skill level of the labor force. right? But in the short run, it will reduce the availability of the labor force as more individuals will now be engaged in education rather than working. So this is not the correct option. And if you look at option B, an increase in birth rate, right? So an increase in birth rate will affect the labor force, but in the long run, as more individuals will eventually basically enter the labor workforce. So it will not affect the labor force in the short run. So this would also not be correct. An increase in the immigration of skilled labor. Now this will directly increase the available labor force in the short run. Immigration with an I means more people coming into the country. So this will, directly increase the labor force available in the short run, and skilled immigrants can immediately contribute to production, to boosting economic growth, and hence that makes C the correct answer. The next question 19, says which factor explains the difference between GDP and GNI? Okay, so this is an interesting question. So GDP, basically, we know that GDP measures the total value of all the goods and services that are produced within a country's border, in a given time period, regardless of, whoever owns the production assets. And while on the other hand, GNI is measuring the total income that is earned by a country's residents and businesses, including any income that is earned abroad, right? And so it follows that minus any income that is, repatriated or remitted back. And so it follows that GNI is basically GDP plus net income from abroad, right? And net income from abroad includes the incomes. If you talk about net income from abroad, it includes incomes from foreign investments that have been made and that income from foreign investments basically includes income from rent, income from interest and dividends. And so your net incomes from abroad would include your employee compensations, right? Your wages and salaries that are sent back, right? Because you see, while GDP is measuring the output that is produced in the country, the GNI would measure the income that is received by this particular country. So while GDP is measuring the output and hence the income, basically GDP is measuring both the output and hence the income, which is equivalent. The output is equal, the value of the output is equivalent to the value of the income generated that is produced in the country's borders. Your GNI is measuring the income that is received by this particular country. And so it follows that if you talk about, let's say, if you look at option number A, so option B and C are totally incorrect, but there's a confusion generally among students between A and D. Now, if you look at option A, it says foreign investment in domestic automobile industry. So let's say we're talking about Pakistan, let's say here, and this Japanese company invests in Pakistan, and it sets up a domestic, in Pakistan sets up an automobile industry. And so the amount of money it brings in terms of foreign investment that it does here, that foreign investment would not create a difference between GDP and GNI, because the only difference will be created when that foreign investment would earn income. So foreign investment would basically increase your GDP by boosting domestic production, but it will not directly impact GNI unless and until that foreign investment generates income for domestic residents abroad, unless and until that investment is generating income in the form of profits or dividends for residents abroad. And so this would be the incorrect answer, right? A lot of students might have marked this because they might have thought that, okay, fine, foreign investment in domestic automobile industry would mean that, it is going to generate profits and, maybe, dividends. And so it will create a difference. While they are not entirely wrong, but if you look at option A, it doesn't talks about the income that would be generated from those, foreign investment. It talks about the foreign investment itself, right? And so that will not itself create a difference between GDP and GNI. But option number D, salaries that are remitted by those working abroad to their home accounts would definitely would create that difference, because remittances from workers that are working abroad are considered part of the net income from abroad, and they increase the GNI. They would increase the GNI of the country to which they are sent, the amount of money that is sent. So they increase the GNI because they represent the income earned by residents working in other countries and sent back home. And this option correctly explains the difference between GDP and GNI. So option D is the correct answer. The next question number 20 says, what is true about a government's macroeconomic objectives? So the first option says economic growth ensures more even distribution of income. This is incorrect because economic growth does not necessarily ensure a more even distribution of income. I mean, growth can lead to higher overall income, but it can also lead to income inequality if the benefits are not evenly distributed. So this is incorrect. Option B says increasing output ensures that more workers are employed. Now, increasing output can lead to higher employment, as obviously more workers would be needed to produce all the additional goods and services. But the thing is that this does not always guarantee. I mean, this is not guaranteed. Why? Because let's say, especially if your technological advancements basically are made, or your economy technologically progresses, or there are, let's say, productivity improvements, right, across the economy. So this will reduce the need for labor then, right? It will reduce the demand for labor in that case. So this option is not necessarily true, even if it appears true, but it is not the correct answer basically. However, the best possible option if you would want to select is option C, because choosing between macroeconomic objectives requires a normative decision, which is true. Because policy decisions involve trade-offs between different macroeconomic objectives, such as especially the trade-off between inflation and unemployment. And these decisions, whether we should go for lower inflation and compromise on unemployment, and these decisions basically are normative in nature because they are based on value judgments about which objectives the government should prioritize, right? And so that makes this option C the correct option. Question number 21 says the original equilibrium in the economy is represented by point X, the intersection of AD and AS, and the government decreases the money supply. What is the new equilibrium? So a decrease in the money supply would basically reduce your aggregate demand, causing the aggregate demand curve to shift to the left to 83, and hence D should be the correct answer. The next question number 22 says, how does a government use its central bank to promote expansionary monetary policy? Now we know that expansionary monetary policy aims to increase the money supply and lower your interest rates to stimulate economic activity, increasing aggregate demand and also promoting economic growth. If you look at option number 8, it says increasing interest rates of commercial banks, and increasing interest rates would make borrowing more expensive, which will contract the economy and not expand the economy, which we actually want right now. So this is the opposite of what an expansionary monetary policy aims to achieve. So this option is incorrect. Now, if you look at option B, it says increasing the interest rate on national debt. Now, increasing the interest rate on national debt would also basically generally tighten up the monetary conditions, as basically it would increase the cost of servicing the debt, right? And this would not at all promote an expansionary monetary policy. That makes this the incorrect option as well. And restricting bank credit for consumer durables, restricting bank credit it just means reducing the credit availability or loans for consumers and firms. But it says about consumer durables. So restricting bank credit would reduce the availability of loans basically for consumers. Thereby, this would contract economic activity. So it's a contractionary monetary policy. And so we are left with D, which is the correct answer. But then D is the correct answer because increasing the issue of notes and coins, that is, increasing money supply, is a direct method of expansionary monetary policy, and this action will basically end up reducing it will basically increase the money supply in the economy and lower down the interest rates and encourage borrowing and spending in the economy, expand the economy basically, right? So D is the correct answer. Question number 23 says, which combination of problems would be most likely to cause a country's government to reduce taxation and lower the interest rates? Now, obviously, reducing taxation and then also lowering the interest rate is an expansionary demand side policies, that is expansionary monetary and fiscal policy, basically, so that, if you look at the answer option, the first says demand per inflation and balance of payment current account deficit. So demand per inflation, we know, occurs when your AD is outspacing your AS, which leads to higher prices. And to combat that, the government typically increases interest rates and possibly taxes even, not decrease them. So this is the incorrect option, right? Because a current account deficit would not necessarily, prompt the government to come up with tax reductions or lower interest rates. While option B, demand for inflation, a low level of investment, I mean, demand for inflation would usually be countered by contractionary policies, right? So, and if you look at option C, high unemployment and a a balance of payment current account deficit. So high unemployment could, or in fact would, prompt the government to implement expansionary policies to stimulate job creation. But a current account deficit is typically addressed through trade policies, right? And might not directly influence the decisions by the government on taxation and interest rates. So the government would come up with trade related policies, or you can say expenditure switching and dampening policies to improve your current account balance position. And so option D says high unemployment and a low level of investment. So high unemployment would definitely prompt the government to reduce taxes and lower interest rates to stimulate activity and job creation. And if you have a low level of investment, is also going to call for lower interest rates by the central bank to encourage businesses to borrow and invest. And this combination is very much aligned with the use of expansionary fiscal and monetary policy, and hence this would make option D the correct answer. Question number 24 says what would be the best policy for a country to reduce a BOP deficit? And while A seems to appear as the right answer, let's see why B, C, and D could not be the right answer. So option B says an increase in exchange rate. An increase in exchange rate is going to cause it's a currency appreciation, so it will make your domestic goods more expensive for foreign buyers and foreign goods more cheaper for domestic consumers, and hence it will reduce exports and increase imports, which will worsen your current account deficit. And a reduction in your direct taxes will increase your disposable incomes and can potentially increase spending on imports, again worsening your BOP deficit or your current account deficit position. And reducing subsidies would increase production cost, making domestic goods more expensive and less competitive internationally, which can lead to decrease in exports and potentially increase your current account deficit. And so it follows that A should be the correct answer, because higher interest rates can attract hot money inflows, that is foreign financial capital, improving the financial account position of the BOP. And if the financial account position of the BOP would improve, it would reduce the BOP deficit. Right, guys? So that makes A the correct answer. The next question 25, says the government wants to protect its textile industry from imports. Which policy is least likely to have an impact on the import of textiles? So a ban will definitely have an import. It's a trade protection policy, and so is tariff, will have an impact. These both will have an impact on all textiles sold in the country required to meet minimum quality standards. So quality standards act as non-tariff barriers, making it more difficult for foreign textiles to enter the market if they do not meet the required standards. So this is again a barrier, and it will have an impact on the import of textile, will reduce the imports of textiles. So option B would be the correct answer. And you see, a sales tax on all the textiles that are sold in the country will sort of raise the cost of all textiles, but it does not directly restrict imports, right? And so option B would be the correct answer. Question number 26 says a major European company announced that the primary income account deficit of its BOP changed from 20 billion to 50 billion. And what would have contributed to this change? And if you look at the answer options, the correct answer option that would be option B, an increase in investment dividends paid to foreigners, because this will directly impact the primary income account, because if a country pays more dividends to foreign investors, it increases the outflow of income, thereby increasing the deficit in the primary income account. And hence option B would be the correct answer. The next question number 27, says the diagram shows the amounts of cotton and butter that can be produced in countries X and Y with given quantity of resources, and what can be concluded. So let's figure this out. So you have cotton and butter, and you have two countries X and Y, and X can make maximum 300 cotton and 190 butter, if not and 190 butter together, but depending upon whether resources are allocated. If resources are allocated to butter just, so 190 butter with 0 cotton, and 300 cotton with 0 butter, basically. That's what I meant. Anyways, and then we have 500 cotton and 200 butter. So if we calculate the opportunity costs, so the opportunity cost of, let's say, 1 unit of butter, right, would be how much would be for country X would be 300 over 190, that is, let's say 1.6 cotton. And so it means that for every 1 butter country X makes, it forgoes 1.6 cotton. And if country Y makes 1 butter, it would forgo 500 divided by 200, would forgo 2.5 cotton. Right, so it means that country Y would forgo more cotton to produce the same 1 butter, while country X will forgo less cotton to produce the same 1 butter. And hence it follows that country X should have a comparative advantage in the production of butter. And let's see if that we do have an option. Yes, so option B says country X has a comparative advantage in the production of butter. So option B is the correct answer for question 27. The next question, question 28, says what is indicated by an economy's terms of trade? So the degree of its dependence on imports or international compare. Okay, so pretty straightforward. The correct answer would be C, because it says the purchasing power of its exports relative to imports, and we know that the terms of trade is indicating how much a country can import for a given amount of exports, right? And if a country's terms of trade would improve, it means that it can buy more imports for each unit of its exports, right? And so that makes option C the correct answer. The next question, question number 29, says what will cause an increase in the demand for US dollars? And the first option says dividends paid from US firms to foreign shareholders. Now, I mean, when US firms will pay dividends to foreign shareholders, the foreign shareholders will obviously convert the dividends into their own currency, which means selling the US dollar. So this is not increasing the demand for US dollars. Option B says foreign firms buying US dollars. Now, when foreign firms will buy for foreign firms buying US firms. When foreign firms will buy US firms, they will obviously need dollars to complete the transaction. And this would basically increase the demand for US dollars, because they will convert their own currency into dollars to make that purchase, right? And hence this option will obviously cause an increase in demand for US dollars, and it follows that B should be the correct answer. Question number 30 says what is not included in the current account of the balance of payment? And current account of the BOP records transactions involving the export and import of goods and services, the incomes from abroad, the net factor income, and current transfers. And hence it follows that the correct answer should be D, foreign direct investment, because FDI is recorded in the financial account of the BOP, not the current account. So D is the correct answer. So that's it, guys. I wish you all the best of luck for your results, and we can further discuss things in the comment section. Until then, take care.